scholar. Look like a martyr to marauders like Tartar. Wise out, slaughter, whack MCs, order, applauder. Original woman, decipher the womb. Crown of creation, fruit of the planet, earth and
Evolution is not going to happen like yesterday. That there's work to be done to understand that even within our eliminating the exception clause in the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that allows for involuntary servitude when duly convicted of a crime. We, in fact, under the leadership of Whitley Carpenter, who is now, of course, the president of NCBL, but she's also a very active member of our section. And we actually got involved with an organization that's main focus is getting rid of that 13th Amendment clause. And we've signed on and we are supported. So that we have various actions that we support, and we know there are things that we have to do now as we move towards abolition. I'm thinking of one of our speakers says it's not moving towards abolition, we got to do it now. This is back in one of our conferences a few years ago. But we know that we have actions that we as chapters or individuals can take now. We can, in fact, for example, keep law enforcement accountable, raise it when they have crossed the line. We can work towards eliminating the money bail system. We can work to decriminalize all marijuana and low-level drug charges, all traffic matters, and all status offenses, such as loitering, entering a building, trespassing, vagrancy, panhandling, and public urination. In fact, earlier we had our keynote speaker, Nkechi Taifa, and one of the things that we can lay at her leadership, she didn't do it by herself, but her leadership was addressing the 100-to-1 crack, powder, cocaine sentencing, that under her leadership, it shrunk to 18-to-1. Still needs work. It still needs work. But those are the kinds of things that we can continue to do and support in moving towards abolition. And the last thing I want to say is that there's some things people say, well, how do you do it? It's sort of like our ancestors. Some of our ancestors 400 years ago, 300 years ago, 350 years ago, didn't believe that they would ever be free. But many of our ancestors held that vision. And the freedom, in quotes freedom, I call it, so-called freedom, came because they held the vision. And their supporters and allies who were not enslaved held the vision and helped do the work. So we must, our view is, in UCBL through our section, we have to hold the vision, but do the work as we hold the vision. Thank you.
Posting okay?
Yes.
Read the greetings of New African Independence. Free the land.
Free the land. Free the land.
Free the land.
Free the land.
By any means necessary. All right, so I'm gonna keep my remarks for 5 minutes. Well, where are my students at? Can I get your hands? Students, undergrad, otherwise. Where my students at? Okay. So I want to say, for myself, but probably on behalf of the other folks here, we love y'all. We glad y'all here. We are here for y'all. Don't be shy, right? You are the continuance of this legacy that we're building upon, all right? So I want to make that clear. To that end, one of the things that's come up is how do we engage young folks? And one of the things that we're working on and thinking about locally, but also just thinking about in this particular moment in time where we're going to be seeing continuances of repression among our people, and folks are going to be continuing to organize and do direct actions, is the role of legal observers. Anyone here done any legal observing in the last year? You've done legal observing in the last year. Okay, cool. For those of you who aren't aware, legal observing is a way in which folks who are supporting different types of direct actions come to these sorts of actions, usually on the invitation of folks who are organizing them, to do a couple things. One is they actually observe the actions and activities of police and other state officials. Two, when they act in different ways. They make sure to document what's going on. And then hopefully this doesn't happen, but if folks are arrested, legal observers are also able to help kind of get information to make sure that folks are able to get out as soon as possible. And they're also supposed to be sort of a deterrent so that people know that we got eyes on them, right? We got people here who aren't necessarily participating in the actual actions, who have eyes on you and will be able to make sure that we're taking that into account. And so I wrote a short little essay about a year ago that kind of talks about how do we link this idea around observing the state as part of this longer lineage of Black liberation work, right? Like since we got here, where you talk about minority communities, you're talking about social emancipation, right? We always had to have folks in our communities who are looking out and making sure that we're keeping eyes on the state. Some people link legal observers more to kind of cop watch and what's happening with the BPP, although it kind of was something that happened even before that. And NCBL, right, linking it to our history, has had a history of both doing trainings around legal observing as well as having a Black Legal Observer Collective in New York City that was around for several years. And this is important, right? Someone who does organize and work on the side and was a part of a Black Legal Observer Collective in New York City, one of the things that Black organizers were saying is like, we want our people to be out here doing the legal observing. NLG, the National Lawyers Guild, if you're familiar with them, I know most folks in here are, but folks who are new, students in particular, you might see them, they got these green, bright hats, right? Those are legal observers, right? And sort of the things that I laid out earlier are the roles that they play. What we're trying to do in NCBL, Georgia, which we're hoping to use as sort of a pilot, is to build out these sort of Black Legal Observer collectives, right? So what we want to do is we want to use these as a way to get our young people, our folks who maybe are less leftist, but want to be useful within the context of doing movement work, to join these legal observer collectives so that you kind of be exposed to some of the things that folks are fighting for by virtue of sort of being at these activities, and to provide a very useful set of skills, right? You don't have to be a lawyer to be a legal observer. You can be a legal worker, but you don't have to be. And we are, as I mentioned before, hoping to pilot something in Atlanta. The way we're approaching it right now is first, we're trying to do some sort of some political education. Right? So what are legal observers? What's the lineage of it? What's the importance of it? We did that virtually, I want to say maybe a month ago. And so our next phase is going to be actually start to put together some trainings. Right? And so the idea was that we have our people in NCBL becoming trained legal observers. And so my last 30 seconds, I would just say, I hope you all, let me just start here. How many of y'all are interested or know someone who might be interested in joining a Black Legal Observer Collective? All right, cool. So if you're not in NCBL, obviously, or you got people who are interested, who aren't in NCBL, make sure they join, and just be on the lookout as we continue to sort of build out this pilot in Atlanta. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jillian, for the important work that you do. And the role of the legal observer is really important, but the Black legal observer is particularly important when folks are out there on the front lines and fighting for the right. So let's go. Right now, we're going to allow Attorney Bob Boyle to introduce himself and give his remarks for 5 minutes. And Attorney Boyle is on the screen, and then Jennifer will pass it on to you. And then after that, we'll hear remarks from Mr. Edison, Attorney Edison.
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me and everything? Yes. Great. My name is Bob Boyle. I'm an attorney. I practice in New York City. And first of all, it's such an honor to be asked by CDBL to come here and speak, and it's an honor to be on the same panel as those who are here today. There have been members of the NCBL who have been guided by practice of law. And I just want to mention 3 of them who are now on the witness: Andy Hayward Barnes, who directed the Attica Brothers Legal Defense, and really was the model for a mass defense. 70 indictments, and the defendants won them all. under Hayward's leadership. And then, through her friend and Betty, Joan Gibbs, we plotted many a legal insurrection in the evenings, and she was a big influence on me. And finally, Chuck played a member, who was one of the best trial attorneys I was ever observed. The government hated when he was in the courtroom. But all of these people have really influenced me in my development. Watching the videos earlier, Jalil brought to mind, in 1975, I was a student at the SUNY New Paltz in New York. And there was a program where we could go into Greenhaven Correctional Facility as part of a prison program. So I went one night, and who was in the program? My future client and friend, Daruba bin Wahad, and Jamila Al-Amin, formerly known as A-Trap Brown. And we ended up going in there every week, and that was college for me. I learned and appreciated much more institutionalized racism, the role of white supremacy in the criminal justice system. And when I eventually did go to law school, I dedicated myself essentially to fighting wrongful convictions, particularly the wrongful convictions about political prisoners. I became Daruba bin Wahad's lawyer. He was serving a life sentence, and we were able to free him in 1990. One of the first COINTELPRO cases that were successful. And in just a few minutes I have remaining, I understand there's some students in the audience, and the work around legal observing is critical in terms of saving people and just to be able to secure our rights to protest. But, you know, there's other work, and the work around political prisoners is equally essential. What Daruba has taught me was we cannot separate the freedom of political prisoners from the movement for liberation as a whole. They're part of that work is part of that movement. In South Africa, you saw it with Nelson Mandela. And so I would hope that some of the students, some of the younger lawyers, will become involved in the cases. You know, we're going to hear about Maria Abu Jamal, Ellen Peltier, Jamila Amin, who's still in jail, and Kamal Siddiqui. All of these folks are serving lifetimes, and they need your help. And believe me, when I started, I didn't know a thing. I made a lot of mistakes. And we learned from our mistakes. And, you know, the young folks today are a lot smarter than I was. And I have a lot more access to technology and smarts. And we really need you in the struggle for political prisoners. So with that, once again, thank you for having me, and hope to speak more on the roundtable.
Thank you, Attorney Gold. Attorney Jennings.
Yes, good afternoon. It's so good to be here with you today in community, and it's an honor to be on this panel. I wanted to thank you for playing the clips of our political prisoners, some of them. They say far more than I could probably ever say in this lifetime. But as I reflect, I connect the current political moment with previous eras, which I think is really important. The current political moment of the era that we're now in, though rife with a lot of change, as we can all see, also presents a really deep risk of the resurgence of repression of the 1960s and 70s. And it creates a situation where there is a risk of creating a whole new generation of political prisoners. And I represent Leonard Peltier and serve as lead counsel on that case. And That is why the Pelletier legal team, as part of our international efforts, have submitted an input to the United Nations, raising issues related to Leonard's case and all those similarly incarcerated due to political activity, while flagging the risk that this is once again occurring. The retaliation against the Uhuru 3, the countless folks who demonstrate in solidarity with Palestine, the recent designation of the Palestinian fundraising organization, which includes an NLG lawyer, and the indictment of the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, and so many others clearly demonstrate this risk. So in this moment full of political and other meetings, though I think the why, examining the why is really important, I think at the same time we have to identify what is transforming and how can we use this moment of clear transformation for our political and social and other objectives, particularly for our political prisoners. Relatedly, I humbly call upon all U.S. political prisoner campaigns to join forces and collaborate where they can, to jointly call upon the international community on what is now an emergency situation with most U.S. political prisoners in the United States. I believe this is imperative and indispensable at this moment, and I also encourage all of us as Black lawyers and legal workers to do our part to support the People's Senate and the United Front Against Fascism. I think that is really key in the way we move forward. So again, I want to thank you all for having me. It's such an honor to be on this esteemed panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Jalil.
Good afternoon and greetings. Greetings. I think as we deal with the issues of abolition, and also is a broad concept that includes not only this concern that we've raising this afternoon in terms of political prisoners, but just the entire system that has been designed to criminalize and to suppress African presence in the United States. And one of the questions that was raised earlier in an acknowledgement of our current state of war is, well, what are we going to do, during this time or at this moment? What specifically will it take? What is it for us to do? And I think that as we look at that question, we can look at it in terms of a general issue and then talk about more specifics. But I think that we have to at least have a manifestation of a spirit of resistance. We have to resist and agitate against this the criminal apparatus that we find ourselves in. Talk about abolition, and we try to see or to envision a space and place that we would like to create. But at the same time, we're presently in this moment that we're caught up in. And so we have to translate what that resistance means in the everyday aspect of our people's lives within the context of the criminal processes. And so we know that on one hand, when we're talking about our political prisoners, what is it that we can do as advocates and lawyers? What type of representation? And when we say political prisoners, that kind of implies that there's already been a charge, conviction, and sentence. And so what is it that we can do to not only to support their condition of incarceration, not support, but not to support that, but to support them as they are in that state of condition. So there are challenges in terms of the conditions of confinement. There's challenges in terms of the whole parole apparatus. And then, of course, as Sister Jennifer has raised the prospect of internationalizing the effort of the state of political prisoners in the United States, to see to what extent can there be some accountability of the government's involvement in it, and ultimately gain our prisoners of freedom. But when we talk about political prisoners, we're talking about brothers and sisters who have, at this point, have been incarcerated for years and decades, you know, and there seems to be, for the average person on the street, no history or memory of our brothers and sisters and the efforts that they were engaged in terms of seeking liberation and their participation and involvement in the liberation movement. And so one thing we have to remember is to still, in this moment, to raise them up and support. And let me just take time out for a minute as I say that, to acknowledge our brother Jalil Muntaqim, who is free now after as a result of being a soldier, freedom fighter for our people. So we want to thank you, our brother, for doing that. And so, what other types of things can we do? You know, we certainly have to not let their effort, their resistance, their commitment to liberation be in vain. Well, another dynamic that, again, Sister Jennifer and the work that she has been doing with others in terms of, yes, our brothers and sisters did not receive the so-called death penalty as the ultimate sanction in the conviction, but the reality is, given the way the processes are, that their sentences of 40, 50, 60, whatever that sentence is, ultimately, in effect, is a sentence of death by incarceration, because the parole apparatus, no matter how positive their institutional history or profiles may be, ultimately the parole board just denied, together with the type of conditions of confinement. Their health deteriorates, don't get the type of medical attention, the impact of solitary confinement emotionally on the mental health, and then with the constant denial of parole, our brothers end up transitioning while incarcerated. Or they'll say, well, your health has deteriorated to such an extent, well, we'll release you, we'll release you, and at this point, and then they have a few months of life, but at the same time, they are among family and friends too. So, but that's a reality of that condition, of their condition. And so most of the work has been post-conviction. But at the same time, we have to be prepared to deal with the trial dynamics of these political prosecutions. We know the Yahuwah 3 were just tried, and a victory of sorts. There on the 2 counts, they were acquitted of the charge of failing to register as a foreign agent, but then they were convicted of the conspiracy to do the thing that they were acquitted on. And then also the most recent political prosecution is of our brother Chokwe Anton Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, and which is purely a political prosecution. We're at the beginning stages of that, and we'll see how that unfolds. But we have to be ready as lawyers in terms of what it is that we're going. What we do is we have to be ready to engage the battle in the trial. We have to be prepared to organize with the non-lawyers, the mass movement, in support of the political brothers and sisters who are subject to these prosecutions. And we just have to never stop resisting until victory is won.
Thank you, Brother Jeff. You all please excuse me. I failed to introduce our wonderful student respondent, Malaya Waller. And she is here. I'm sorry. But yeah, she is here today to help enrich our panel. And she is a 3L here at North Carolina Central. So please make sure to, wish her well and congratulate her. We want to uplift our students as we do this work because we do know that our students are the future. And as we examine the issues in the criminal justice system, we need to start with abolition. Abolition is where we should start. And so Ms. Ajua touched on that a little bit, but I do want to kind of open this up to all the panelists and anyone who feels called to answer. What are things that we need to be doing on the way to abolition as it relates to engaging the community, or whether it, as it relates to empowering our young lawyers? How can we teach them how to be abolitionist attorneys? What can we do now, right? Because we always talk about it kind of in theory, like that's something we're striving to get to, but there's actual steps we can practice now. And so I just want to open that question up to our panelists. Ms. Ajua?
Well, what we can do with the young lawyers is talk about how the current system creates a situation that is untenable for our community. And then together with us, as we're learning, we did the whole thing, we've done sessions where we talked about, Rebecca and Jeff and others, talked about how do we use the examination in the current cases to lead towards the judge or the jury saying, no, we're not going to convict. So how do we flip, so to speak, the script usually used in examination of a witness to talk about how this makes no sense, how a sentence of so many years makes no sense for this behavior? How do we lift up alternatives to incarceration was the thing that we talked about. So it's beginning to change the view of judges and juries in terms of this behavior that this person is accused of, and you know, when you get to, by the time you get there, you get into really looking at the sentencing phase, but you build it in at the beginning, right? And you talk about how it makes no sense to utilize the current systems to address this behavior. And that becomes something that is a style of examination, and then of course, cross-examination. So that we are in our mind, we are not looking at it through the lens of the traditional system, so to speak, even though, as Jeff pointed out in one of our meetings, we always want to get our client acquitted, right? That is the goal. But how do we formulate questions? How do we formulate the lineup of witnesses such that at the end, if they're not acquitted, which of course is our ultimate goal, the jury and those who are making decisions are saying, but it makes no sense to give this person prison because of what the attorney has done.
Thank you. I see a question. Ms. Moore? Is your hand up?
Does anybody have a question?
I thought I saw your hand up, Judy. Is your hand up?
No, I'm just wondering if any of the people on,
I'm getting ready to pose a question to them. Do you have any questions or anybody would like to respond to what Sister Audrey said? Jalil? Brother Jalil?
Yes, first of all, thank you, brother, for that acknowledgement. I really appreciate that. I also want to make a reference that I am co-chairman, co-founder of the National Jericho Movement. If you're not following the National Jericho Movement, please type in National Jericho Movement so you learn about the political prisoners. There's a list of political prisoners that we support and we advocate for their freedom and liberation from the institutions of slavery, right? Because the penal system is effective the slave system. It's what they committed as a people. So I want to make that point clear. Second of all, I'm saying the issues of abolition. We have to expand the word, right? The word abolition means to exterminate, to terminate, right? To abolish, right? And for us to be abolitionists, we must be able to expand the idea of abolishing anything and everything that dehumanizes, degrades, and devalues black people, right? If it does that, then we can be abolished. Okay, any institution, any system of government that in fact dehumanizes, degrades, and devalues black people, we need to abolish, right? So we need to term more proficiency, right, and broadly, right, in terms of how we're going to tackle the systems of white supremacy and capitalist imperial exploitation of black people. So that's the point I want to make, sis. I appreciate the thought of the idea of abolition, of we being abolitionists. But we need to really expand the idea of that in terms of anything and everything that dehumanizes, devalues, and demeans our existence. We need to abolish. We need to be abolitionists.
Thank you, Brother Jura. And I just want to ask our panelists online, Attorney Bob and Attorney Jones, are you guys able to hear our folks in the audience? Perfect, great, because that was some very rich information, and I know Attorney Jones, you wanted to, you mentioned that in your statement, collaborating, putting all of the movements together that are advocating for the release of our brothers and sisters that are been incarcerated for years. And that kind of leads me to, oh, sorry.
Can y'all hear me in the back? That's great. So I have 4 offerings on that question. I think first would be study. Right, so I think get with a couple homies, learn about abolition, read some Marion Kaba, some Ruthie Gilmore. Right, I think study is a good place to start. Right, all you need is 2. I think the second thing, there's a website. I think it's 1 Million Experiments that has some really dope examples of folks leaning into abolition, leaning into ways in which we keep our community safe. I think third, and related to that, is finding folks in your community who are experimenting around different ways of engaging in community safety and security, right? It's one thing to talk about it in theory. It's another thing to actually struggle with people around how do we do this, right? If someone comes to my crib talking reckless, right, what's the way in which we do that that's not sort of rooted in some of the punitive practices that the state tells us we should be using? And the final thing I would say, I'm lifting up what Baba Jalil mentioned, go online to Jericho, look at the PP campaign, join that campaign, and do the work. I feel like if you're doing any organizing work and it's not involving work around freeing our political prisoners, I have questions. because I think, again, along with what was mentioned before, you talk about what's going on in Stop Cop City, all the folks who've been indicted under RICO there. There's a process that's gonna continue to happen, that's gonna continue to get our folks inside who are PPs, who are gonna be, political prisoners. And I work on Baba Kamal Siddiqui's campaign. Baba Kamal, Black Panther Party member, Black Liberation Army member, was in a truncated version. I'll just say he was railroaded for not helping the FBI locate and bring Assata Shakur back to the States. He's been inside for over 20 years now, and it hits different when you actually are working on the campaign. And I've had to leave those types of visits and look at our system the same way, right? So I think engaging in those types of campaigns will help you see the ways in which the state and this system is not for us, as Mama Ajma mentioned. And so I would encourage all of you to find a local PP campaign to actually do some work on.
Absolutely. Not only just a local PP campaign, but like you said, find abolitionists in your area. Actually doing that work and struggling with them makes the world of a difference. You'll start to realize that you can apply abolition in every area of your legal practice. And so the question now I would like to pose to Jennifer and Bob, because I know you guys are currently representing political prisoners. Could you share with us what are the specific challenges that you guys have experienced as it relates to representing some of our political prisoners that are on post-conviction, right? What's the challenges in writing these motions, and what motions are you writing? Could you please just share your experience with us?
I'm sorry. You go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. One of the things that is immediately done to a political prisoner who's convicted is isolation. They are placed in the most remote prison facilities that this country has to offer. Audrey knows a lot about this from working on the Lexington case, the Lexington Women's Control Unit, which she and others were successful in shutting down that women's control unit. So isolation is a big thing, because just on a practical level, to be able to fly to where Jalil Amin is right now, I think he's in FCC San Diego, or one of those places, is just time-consuming and difficult, even though you have the best intentions of doing it. There's only so many hours in the day, and so little help that we have. So the isolation also has the effect of preventing the political prisoners from becoming household names. Because in general, people can't communicate with them. They can't communicate very well even with their loved ones and with their supporters. So that the effort to free them, the political effort to free them, has all these roadblocks. In terms of actual legal work or motions, a lot of our political prisoners who are in the time limit for them filing any motions to get a new trial has long since passed. In 1996, that William Clinton signed a law called the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which required people in prison, all people in prison, to bring a habeas corpus within 1 year of when the conviction became final. And as we know, those of us who do this post-conviction work, you can need years to gather the legal stuff and the information to bring an effective habeas corpus petition. And if you lose your first one, you have to get the permission of the Court of Appeals to file a second one, and then you only accept that second one if the constitutional error that no rational juror would have found them guilty. That's not a constitutional error. So they've written into the law these ways of essentially eliminating habeas corpus. But that's not the end, I mean, as my mentor Liz Fink used to say, dare to struggle, dare to win. And, you know, we have to build campaigns around parole. We have to build them around abolition, as we talked about. We have to build them around compassionate release. And any number of ways that we can get our political prisoners out of jail. Jennifer?
Yes, well, Bob, you said a lot that I agree with, almost took the words out of my mouth. I would certainly say that isolation and communication policies really do a number on the accessibility and the visibility of especially federally housed political prisoners. The media policies, for instance, have almost totally silenced in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, that is. Folks like my client, who hasn't been granted an interview with the media in almost 2 decades, especially on film, where you won't find anything for almost 23 years. And I believe the same is with Imam Jalil. Also being placed in maximum security prisons, whether it's just the garden variety maximum security prison or ADX, where folks are held in lockdown or what is formerly called modified operations for 24 hours a day, only getting showers and access to the phones on an irregular basis. That really messes up the communication and intervenes in the communication between the lawyer and also support folks. In those times, it's actually very difficult, particularly with USP Coleman 1, where my client, Leonard Peltier, is held to even get a legal call. And the same was true when Eric King was housed at ADX. They did a very similar thing, and it was almost a part-time job to keep up with our requests for legal calls. And eventually we got them stabilized a little bit, but it was still very difficult. The isolation does not just end with attorneys, but with family visits. Those are often made difficult for political prisoners, whether even sometimes just in the processing itself, which could be very humiliating and for some families and comrades of our political prisoners. And we have seen that. In terms of filings, Bob mentioned the difficulties. Certainly look into the Hendricks decision, Jones versus Hendricks, about how it makes it more difficult to get those 2255 habeases in order. The dissent of Justice Jackson is really revealing about the effects of that decision if you read it. And it's certainly the death knell for certain habeases. So we have to be creative, understand, and as I know many of you do, that there are certain barriers in place. Many of our old-time political prisoners held in the federal system are considered, just for short, old law prisoners. And so the avenues for release are substantially narrowed. And that's what I'll say about that for now. But a lot of the political prisoners who have been federally convicted or held face that challenge. And we should certainly dig into why that is and certain particular remedies that help really effectuate the release of those prisoners. So, communication bans, procedural, rubber stamp parole commissions and boards, things like that, all deter or intervene in an adverse way to the process of release.
I can add just one more thing. Notwithstanding all the roadblocks that are put in front of lawyers getting to the prisons, distance, we as lawyers have to go see and visit the prisoners. whether that be the political prisoners or any of your other clients, that maintaining that attorney-client relationship and that support is invaluable, not just to us, but to the morale and the strength of the prisoner to keep them going. So it's really important that we maintain that contact.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Ryan?
At this point, I was gonna ask, as we continue to fight for the justice, is there anything that we can do to?
We can't understand what you said, slow it down.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So as we continue to fight for their justice, I was gonna ask, not being an attorney, so I can't go do a visit, but how do we support our political prisoners while they're in there, whether that's letters or, I mean, I don't know, but what to best do so they know that there are people on the outside that, you know, are still caring and are diligent about their.
I think Brother Jalil can speak to that directly.
Hey, Bob. Bob used to come visit. Bob was one of my attorneys as well, right? He got us a habeas corpus back in the court at one church. We didn't win, but he got us back in the federal court, and did excellent work. He's my comrade. I was with that point, especially clear. Yes, sis. Go to nationaljerichomovement.com, right? And you'll find out our political prisoners. He works with Kamal Siddiqui. So Kamal Siddiqui's campaign. He made mention of that. We're trying to get him out on parole, right? You can go sign up and you can go visit him. I don't know where you're stationed or where you're based at. You're in Atlanta, Georgia, right there. You know where he's at. And that's where Kamal is. All right. You can write to Iman Jalil out of Maine. All right. You can also write to Jojo Bowen, another comrade who is not getting a lot of attention, a lot of support. Right. You can go online and you can find all these brothers' names. And Sister Jennifer supports Alina Peltier. Right. He is our relative. Okay. And he needs to be supported. He's a champion, a warrior of the Sioux Nation. Right. The Ngala Sioux Nation. Right, and a war based upon Wounded Knee debacle, right, that he got convicted of, right? Iman Jamil out of Maine. We know he's innocent because somebody confessed to the crime for which he was convicted of. Iman Jamil out of Maine, all right? And so we need to fight for his release. We need to get him back home, back to Georgia, right? Because they got him in federal institution and he don't have a federal sentence, all right? That's problematic, okay? And so we need to get him back to Georgia. So that we can work on getting him out as another issue. So go on the website, right? Look these brothers and sisters up. We got a sister named Joe Powell where I live up in Rochester. We're working on getting her a clemency campaign. So we need to get letters for her. If anybody want to write a letter for Joe Powell, right, look it up. Write a letter for her for a clemency campaign. I just wrote a letter last night while I was in the hotel for her, right? This is what we need to do. So this kind of work that is possible, that helps. Right? Write a letter, send a food package if they got food packages, and naturally, you know, if you accept their phone calls, if you want to accept their phone calls. So we have communication outside contact communications. I went to the Pro Board 14 times before I was released. All right? I was eligible for Pro 2002. I didn't get out to 2020. I've only been out 4 years now. All right? So, and my being able to survive was a result of my continuing to fight on the inside, but the support base that we have on the outside. Sister Nikichi used to come visit me as well, you know, while I was on the inside. So this is the kind of work that our lawyers, right, who are advocates, who are, quote unquote, and I make this deliberately, revolutionaries, right? We have an obligation because they represent the best of us. The political represent the best of us. Why? Because they don't want to put their life and liberty on the line for our struggle. Right? We cannot leave them behind, right? When we talk about reparations, there is no reparations but the freedom of our political prisoners, right? That's been the top of the list in terms of any discussion on reparations, right? The freedom of our political prisoners. So that's also important. So become part of the movement, be part of the defense committee, write a letter. If you can't do nothing more, right? Send them a birthday card. We have their birthdays on our website, the Jericho website. Right? Just send them a birthday card, right? Tell them what they're all about, right? And it's the spirit, right? It keeps them strong, right? Let them know that they're not forgotten, right? And that's important as well. Thank you, sir, for that question. I appreciate it.
If I can add briefly on that too, we did a campaign, it's called Black Love in Action, through Malcolm X grassroots movement. For Baba Kamal Sadiq, we kind of had these cards put together, and people could write them, they could send them themselves. And he mentioned, right, the ways in which getting those letters, like, meant something to him, right? And so I think, and the only thing I'll add is a lot of these campaigns, like, are also fundraising, right? So, like, raising funds to, put on a commissary, to, like, we're trying to get books, right? He likes to read, right? So there are different efforts based on the campaign that you're looking into. Once you start going to their meetings, they'll give you a sense of, like, what the priorities are. And he's in Augusta State Medical Penitentiary in Eastern Brooklyn.
Yeah. Also, we need to do this work out of gratitude for the sacrifices that these brothers and sisters did. But I think we should do more in terms of being intentional about making the work that is done to get them out and their releases something that moves the struggle forward. I think that, for the most part, many of them are already regarded by quote unquote mainstream in our communities as being marginal, as being unknowns, as obscure people who did things that nobody really understands. They need to occupy a place in our community's consciousness, which is alongside Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks and all of the others. And I think that in addition to that, we need to figure out ways when we have a victory that it's communicated in a way that people understand that this system is not invincible, that it can be overcome, that there is a way through concerted action to overcome it, and for a good cause. I think that we can't leave the community with the perception that we got a quote criminal out of prison. We got a hero out of prison. We got somebody that the system doesn't like, that the society doesn't like, because they were sacrificing for us. They need to understand that. I think if we're more intentional in our work about making sure that kind of message is communicated, then it moves the struggle forward in addition to just paying a debt that we owe to the prisoners themselves.
If I may, I'd like to add a quote to that, what you said, right? And that they're not, criminal being released. One of my dear breast comrade, now ancestor, Marilyn Buck, right? I don't know how many know her. Marilyn Buck, she made the statement that they identify me as an enemy of the state. She says, I must be doing something right. Become the enemy of the state.
Nikki, yes.
Yes, thank you for everything that's been said. Also, I'm really going to say this to Jennifer, who I've never met you, but I did some consulting work as well. And I was doing consulting work for the Kennedy Center on their opera, the only opera Beethoven wrote called Fidelio, which is about a political prisoner. And I was doing a community engagement. It happened to be on October 30th. And I don't know whether it was from the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, whether it's from Jericho Movement, but I received something that morning that said that October 30th, which I knew nothing about, was World Political Prisoner Day, something along those lines. And it was a message about death by incarceration in terms of Leonard, and that he needed to be transferred and all like that. So as part of the community engagement, I did not know that in the audience, Angela, was Kristen Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Department of Justice. Sitting next to her was Liz Oyer, who's a pardon attorney for the United States. I just took that opportunity to let them know there was World Political Prisoner Day, that Leonard Peltier was, they know all about that because they've been denying it all, they in support, but anyway. I brought up death by incarceration. I brought up the fact that, our elders, that even those that are being released, Sekou Odinga, Matul Shakur, Maroon Schultz, Michelle McGee, as soon as they come out, they die and they pass. And I said that I would not be doing my duty if I did not, with these people in the audience, I identified who they were, to let them know that they have a responsibility to listen to what people around the world are saying. Now, specifically referencing Leonard, so probably it's not going to do any good, but I'm just saying we use all opportunities. This was an opera, all white audience and all like that. So just lifting up some of that. So thank you, Jennifer, for your work. And Bob Boyle always, and forever, thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
And Jennifer and Bob, I want to know, we talked about, you all shared with us how your clients are being treated, right? The lack of phone calls, the isolation. And then Brother Jalil shared with us real things that we can do to encourage them and uplift them while they're in that struggle and while you guys are advocating for them and making these motions and trying to get them back into court. But as attorneys, is there something that we can do about the basic human rights violations, right, that are occurring as a result of those that are incarcerated? I don't like saying prisoners because we're all humans first, right? But I understand the term political prisoners, right? But as our brothers and sisters that are incarcerated unjustly, what can we do as attorneys to raise awareness about the basic violations of human rights, right? Because no phone calls. We know that those that have been labeled political prisoners are treated way worse, right, than some of the other people that are incarcerated. So what can we do to challenge those human rights violations?
I stand here for a quick question. So are they defined, the state doesn't record them as political prisoners, right? Okay.
I think we should, and that, honestly, that was my first question. Could we pass that to either Bob or Jennifer? I'll ask you guys, if you guys could please elaborate on how the U.S. criminal justice system defines political prisoners, right? How do we define political prisoners in the U.S.?
Yes, well, I'll go ahead. The United States on an international level has long denied there are even political prisoners in the United States, but there are several definitions thrown around by adjacent organizations that interface with the United Nations about what a political prisoner is. And it's really not a four-part test, but a four-part definition. And it basically sums up a person who is prosecuted formally by the state in relation to their political work. And in that, I certainly don't want to exclude politicized prisoners or jailhouse lawyers, which are really important. Jailhouse lawyers are often retaliated against in a similar way as political prisoners and politicized prisoners. But what I would say in terms of support, it's very important to, of course, support those defense committees. If we see that they have particular actions or initiatives up, any international efforts, and certainly efforts to eradicate qualified immunity, whether that be on the state or the federal level, needs attention. The Prison Litigation Reform Act, which I know is part of the eradication of which I know is a part of Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, which is prisoner-led. One of the things that they demand be eradicated is that Prisoner Litigation Reform Act, which is meant tangibly to procedurally dispense of prisoner claims. It is many say that it is a racist law, but it certainly has the effect of silencing the claims of political prisoners and other prisoners who file their grievances, often do not have legal counsel, really protracts the process in a way that is adverse and damaging.
Sure, thank you. We can show, or at least I argue, that certain prisoners are political prisoners simply by the way they're treated, objectively. Being put into isolation for basically no reason or for trumped up charges. Looking at their cases. We always used to talk about the political prisoner exception to the Constitution. Jalil mentioned his own case where, he should have won. And didn't, because the judge basically rewrote the law in an opinion. And in this particular case, there were three defendants, himself, Albert Washington, and Herman Bell. Albert Washington died in prison when he should have been released. He didn't even get that compassionate release. He died in prison. Sheikh Milton, a great man and a great leader. So the political prisoners are treated differently. I think Jalil, I don't think he, except for a short period of time, was ever housed in a prison that was less than 100 miles from New York City in order to prevent him getting visits. And just the arbitrariness of it all is very frustrating. But what we've stated, folks doing prison work, is that lawyers who care about this, whether it's a political prisoner's case or not, next year, take a prison case. You know all those letters we get from prisoners that sometimes end up on our floor, and we don't answer them? Pick it up and read it. And even if you write back to the man or woman and say, I can't do the case, you're adding to their dignity, that they don't matter. And, I've gotten myself, letters just thanking me for answering a letter. But if you can, take a prison case or write a letter to the commissioner or the warden when someone is being denied medical care. Because just sending that letter can keep them alive. So, keep at it.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or responses in the audience? Yes,
No, just a story. I don't know if you've heard it, but many think of Rosa Parks as just this quiet, tame little seamstress. She was a hardcore revolutionary. And Mario Bedelli frequently said that when he was in prison, she's the only reason that he stayed alive. That Rosa Parks would call the prison on a weekly basis to say, how's Imari doing? And just the fact that they knew that Rosa Parks had their eyes on him kept him alive.
We have one question from our student respondent, and then we'll end the panel. But I think it's really, really important to hold space for our students. So, Malaya, you can come ask your question.
Hi, everyone. My question is, what ways can we bring and continue to bring awareness of current political prisoners and the denial of their rights outside of social media? I know that's a big thing that we use, a big tool. Everyone's on their phone now, but there are still some people who are kind of like in the dark and they don't use social media as much, and or it's so easy to scroll by that they'll just like, okay, whatever, how do we keep up with the ever-changing technology to do this? Anyone?
I think I can.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I think we need to do is to lift the issue up in all forms. I'm not, some of y'all know this, I'm not a great social media person. In fact, I'm not a social media person. But let's just take out, I'm not one. But I do think, we can, sometimes we forget the old school tools. We can write something short and circulate it on various listservs. We can raise our hand when somebody asks, if someone will be on the panel or speak. We can still ask the minister at the church if we can kind of raise up an issue at the church. And many times they will, because many churches have these social justice committees and all of that. And so I think that there are any number of avenues where, we can get the message out. I mean, one of the things that we do periodically, and I think we should probably do it more, is to write up little things and put on our listserv. We got lots of responses, not lots, but got a number of responses when we posted the thing about Shockwave and Talk. But this is letting people know. So I think there are many, many ways that we could do that. I want to add something, and broadening it beyond just political prisoners, even though, I've worked with, political prisoners, But I want to give you my experience, and that's why I think anyone who can visit a prison, visit. Because the first time I went, I don't want to start crying. The first time I went into a prison, I was working at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in the special litigation section that dealt with the rights of the institutionalized. And our biggest caseload was prisons. I went because I was interested in mental health, right? And I was thinking, mental health. So the first case that I had was Reeves v. Estelle. That case was the Texas prison system. It was being sued to shut down the whole system. Unconstitutional, not shut it down, that wasn't. But to get various rights. I went in, fresh out of law school, and the lead attorney, I'm blanking on his name, I can see him just as good, he gave me assignments to interview some prisoners that were going to be put on the state. He did two things that were most valuable for me. He said, do not read their record before you interview them, because and I was going to put them on the stand. Don't read their prison record, right? Because I could have done that. So that helped me engage with them as human beings. I didn't have in front of me that this one person was convicted of killing his grandmama or whatever. These, right. So that was one. It kept them as human beings, not their record. The second thing that I want to say is when I first walked through that prison, I'll be honest, and I maybe was 27, something like that. I wasn't a baby. I almost crumbled. I'll be honest with you. Because first of all, I'm walking down the prison. I forget which one we were in first, so I could tell you. I'm walking down the rows or the cell blocks, that's what they call them. And first of all I'm seeing, and this is Texas now, all I'm seeing is Latino and Black. Exactly. Latino and Black. Yeah, every once in a while you see a white person, right? So that's one. I'm shocked. I'm like, the second thing is the conditions themselves. When I worked, we did conditions of confinement. Now, I understand we're talking about political prisons, but we're talking about abolition. We got to get the whole context of why it's inhumane what we do in general, and then we multiply when we decide this person is a political person, right? I mean, I dealt with cases in that Texas case and other cases in my history of doing this work with the DOJ and ACLU, where the kitchens were full of roaches. The health care was non-existent or minimal, where people were dying from preventable illnesses because they didn't have health care treatment for what you call the silent killers, where people were in Arizona. We had people who were mentally ill that needed mental health treatment, but they were in the general population, so they were a danger not only to others, but to themselves, because somebody was going to kill them, right? So I'm just saying this is abolition is real. I agree with what you said, Jill, I do, but it's real. We are harming people, and we're harming our communities. One person told me, I'm locked up on solitary confinement, then he had a release date. He says, how do you release somebody to go into the community, to live next door to blah, 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 that's been in solitary confinement nonstop for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you release them? So the system that we have of, I don't call it, and Kiki knows this, I coined the phrase years ago, it is not a criminal justice system. I don't even call it a criminal legal system now, that new phrase they're using. It's a criminal punishment system. And it punishes all that go in, and as they pointed out, as political prisoners, it goes beyond. It is extended. So I just urge you to, if you can visit, if you can get, some type of visit, go and see. Because for me, when I left that first prison, it politicized me just being there. It made me committed to ending this kind of treatment that we do to, we call them human beings. They don't treat us, they don't treat our human beings that go into prison as if they're human beings. Thank you.
I think that is a perfect way to end it, and I just want to remind you all, we are not free until we are all free. So our work can't just stop and start and stop with working to get our political prisoners free. We must work to free everyone, to abolish this system that does not help. It does not aid us, and we can't envision and imagine a world where we're dealing with harm at the root of the harm and not punishing people in such inhumane ways. And so I want to remind you all that the work continues. I think Mama Ajua gave us a great point. Go to a prison, and I promise you will not be the same. Thank you all for joining our panel. To our esteemed panelists, Bob, Jennifer, Jeff, Sister Ajua. Thank you all so much.